Hello, hello, hello. How are y'all doing on this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful day? Happy Wednesday. Happy Wednesday, everybody. It looks like my camera might be a little, is that better? Anyhow, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Listen, today I'm going to be talking about the side hustle. The side hustle, not because I promote the hustle culture, because you know we don't do that around here at Her Income Edit. We're going to be talking about how to do this thing while you're still working full time, because as far as I'm concerned, that is the whole point. That is literally the whole point. As you are popping in, let me know if you can see me and hear me okay, so that you don't miss any of this good that I have planned out for you today. Listen, I'm going to start off today with a story. Is that okay with you? Give this video a thumbs up if you can see me and hear me okay. So in August of 2025, I started building Her Income Edit on the side of a full-time job. And it wasn't because I was unhappy with my job, because I wasn't. And it wasn't because I was planning to leave, because I wasn't. And it wasn't because anything was wrong, because at the time, last August 2025, I had a role that I loved. I had a salary that showed up in full and on time every time. I had benefits I had never had at that level. By every conventional measure, I had made the right decision when I went back to a 9 to 5 in 2022. But in August, it was actually before August, something had shifted in me. And I knew, not from fear, but from clarity, that one paycheck, it wasn't going to be enough. And it wasn't because I couldn't survive on that one paycheck. Listen, I was making very good money, but I had already learned what it felt like to have something that was mine. So remember, I went back to a 9 to 5 in 2022. So I already knew what this feeling felt like. And I wasn't willing to keep ignoring that. So in 2025, of August of 2025, and it was in the margins of this full-time job that I had and a completely full life that I still have, I started building again. I decided that I wanted to relaunch my coaching business. I wanted to get back into this space, but I wanted to do it in a different way than what I had done it before. And here's the thing. I wasn't waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, because I'm not a morning person. I wasn't grinding through my weekends. I wasn't sacrificing my peace to prove anything to anybody at that time. I'm not trying to prove anything to anybody at this time either. But what I was doing is I was working with the time that I had. I was working strategically. I was working on the right things and in the right order. And then fast forward, well, I guess now rewind back to March 4th of this year, 2026, I got a calendar invite. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about my layoff story, because I told it in detail on an episode of Nik at Noon. So if you want to hear that story in detail, you can go back and listen to the replay of that, because that's not really what this conversation is about today. Okay. But the fact of the matter is, and what is important is, by 9:15 that morning on March 4th, my role had been eliminated. The job that I loved was gone, and the income that I had been depending on disappeared in the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee. Just think about that for a minute. The job that I loved, it was gone. And the income that I was I depended on. My family depended on it. My life depended on it. It was gone in less than the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee. And here's the thing that I want you to hear. I was okay. I was okay. And it wasn't because I'm fearless or because I had everything figured out. I was okay because I had spent the previous 7 months building something that belonged to me, something that no one could restructure out of existence. And I'm not going to lie to y'all. The layoff did force my timeline for Her Income Edit and all of the products that you have seen come since then. It did force my timeline, but the foundation of what I was building had already been laid. And I want that for you. Not a layoff. I don't want that for anybody. Like that thing sucks bad. Okay. I had never been laid off in my life. There's one friend that I have personally, and she has been laid off multiple times in her career. I had never been laid off before. I have left plenty of jobs. I might have been terminated one or two times, but I had never been laid off. So I don't want that for you, but I do want you to have the foundation. I want you to be the woman who starts building while things are stable, while you have breathing room, while you get to make decisions from strategy instead of desperation. That is what I want for you, and that is what this episode is about. So, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Happy Wednesday, happy hump day. Welcome back to another episode of Nik at Noon. My name is Nik Scott. I'm the founder and CEO of Her Income Edit. We are an online education platform where we help professional women turn their existing skills into coaching income, digital products, and online businesses so they can build multiple streams of income beyond one paycheck. So, if you are a full time professional and you have been saying, I want to build something on the side, and you haven't moved yet, this episode is for you. So I want you to share the link to this video with your biz bestie or with a friend or a woman who's been stalling on an idea. They've been thinking about it, they've been percolating on it, they've been circling it, they've been sitting on it. I want you to drop the link to this video in the group chat. Y'all know what the group chat is. And if you haven't already, go get your notebook and your pens or whatever it is that you take notes on, because if you have been here with me live or in the replay on Nik at Noon, you already know what it is. You already know what it is. You already know there's going to be some things that you're going to want to write down. Hello, hello, hello. Thanks for joining. And specifically for this episode, I am going to be giving you some frameworks and some questions and some things that you might want to jot down, okay? So I want to start here because I think this is where most women stop before they even get started. So women, they'll say things like, I don't have time, and they believe that. And from the outside, it looks completely reasonable because you're working full time, you have a life, you have obligations, you have a finite number of hours in any given day, and most of those hours are already spoken for. Does that sound like you? If it sounds like you, drop me in the comments. So I don't have time. I don't have time, when you say that, it feels like an honest, practical assessment of your situation. But here's what I have learned from building things on the side of a full time job and watching other women do the same. And that is, time is not the problem. The problem is that most people approach building something on the side the same way that they would approach building a full-time business launch. So they're thinking in terms of websites and logos and brand strategies and marketing platforms and course outlines and content calendars and everything else that you've seen other online businesses do. And when you start to stack all of that up against your already full schedule, you're right. Ain't nobody got time for that. Like, ain't nobody got time for that. But here's the thing, that's not where you start. Because the fastest way to build a side income while you're working full time isn't to build the whole thing at once. It's to build just one revenue generating piece at a time. So you'll start with the smallest viable version that can put money into your bank account. And that, what I'm talking about and what I'm getting ready to talk about, it's not a productivity hack. I don't know much about productivity. I don't even know if I manage my time in the best way possible. So I'm definitely not giving you any productivity hacks here. What I'm talking about is a different approach to what starting means. Because most women I work with, they don't have a time problem. They have a scope problem. They're trying to start too much. They're doing too many things at one time, which means they're never ready to start at all. When you're doing all the things, how are you supposed to get ready? So let me give you a number to anchor this on, okay? And that number is 10 hours a week. 10 hours a week is enough. It is more than enough to build a meaningful side income if those 10 hours are used on the right things and in the right order. Remember, I said at the beginning of this episode, I started building what you see now as her income edit on the side of my full-time job because I was doing the right things in the right order. And that is what I'm going to encourage you to do as well. So, what we're not going to do is spend 10 hours, those 10 hours researching. We're not going to spend those 10 hours figuring out your brand or 10 hours. We want to spend those 10 hours on income generating activity. And that distinction matters. And we're going to spend the rest of this episode talking about exactly what that means. But before we get into the frameworks that I promised you that I'm going to give you today, I want to call out something else that's underneath the I don't have time belief, because there are two problems that I see that are layered on top of each other, and most women don't separate them. So the first problem is scope, and we just talked about that. People try to do too many things at one time. And the second part of that is permission. A lot of women are waiting for a signal that it's okay to take their own income generation seriously. We've been, I'm going to personalize this thing. We have been so conditioned to show up for our jobs, our family, our community, our obligations, and whatever else it is that we have been conditioned to show up for, that carving out dedicated time for our own financial future, it feels like something that we have to justify. And I am here to tell you today that you don't have to justify it. You don't have to justify it. If you feel like you do, you don't. Because building income outside of your job isn't a hobby. It's not a passion project that you get to once everything else is handled. It's a financial decision that your future self will either thank you for, or that future self will make you wish that you'd started sooner. And it deserves time on your calendar with the same weight as anything else that matters in your life. So before we go any further, I want you to get real honest with yourself about which problem you're solving. Is it time or is it permission? Because the strategies for either one of those, it's going to be different. And if it's permission, there is no amount of management advice that's going to move you. No amount of time management advice that's going to move you. So before I tell you what the fastest path looks like, I have to talk about the thing most women build first, because this one pattern is responsible for more delayed income than anything else I have ever seen, y'all. Most women build infrastructure before they build the income. Now, we talked about this a little bit a while ago. Infrastructure. What is infrastructure? Infrastructure is your website, your logo, your platform, your email list, your social media presence. It is the perfect name for your offer. It is a course outline that's 43 pages long and has never been shown to a single human being. And all of that, listen, I know what all that requires. I know what it requires to build a website or to oversee the building of a website. I know what it requires to create a logo or to oversee the creation of a logo. I know what it takes to build a platform, to build an email list, to build a social media presence. I know what it takes to create names for all of your offers and to outline your course. I know what it takes. So I know that it's real work. I know that it takes time. And I know that when you're doing these things in the name or in the context or the confines of your business, it feels like progress. It feels like progress. Remember, I like to say feelings are not always facts. The thing about all of those things are that I just went over, none of those things generate income. Not one of them. Not your logo, not your platform, not your email list, not your social media presence, not your website. Not at first. Because income is generated when one person with one problem gives you money in exchange for helping solving that problem. And in the beginning, y'all, that is the only transaction that matters. And here is why the infrastructure trap is so easy to fall into, especially for women, because we're used to preparation. We're the preparers, right? Right? Like, you built your entire career on being thorough, ready, polished, and prepared before you showed up. And that's how you've been rewarded. That's what has made you good at what you do. So when you start building something on your own, your instinct is to prepare for it, to get ready, to build the foundation before you invite people in. And there's nothing wrong with that, except in a business, ready is not a prerequisite for revenue. Revenue is what tells you what you need to be ready for. So you got to get the revenue first, and then you'll know what you need to get ready for. Because you can spend 4 months building a course that nobody buys because you never talk to anybody about it. Like, you can't do this thing in a silo. Or you can spend the next 2 weeks having conversations with people. You can close 2 clients at a rate that pays your mortgage and build a course from what those people tell you they need. You see how those two approaches are they're very different. The second path, it's faster, it's cheaper, and it produces better results. But it feels less safe because it requires you to be seen before you feel completely ready, right? And we've talked about this before on this channel. Hello, hello, hello. Thanks for joining. We've talked about this before on this channel. We've talked about it before in my videos and also here on Nik at Noon. And that is the identity piece. And I'm specifically talking about the discomfort of showing up before everything is polished. That discomfort is real. I'm not dismissing it. I'm not dismissing it at all. Y'all have seen me here live admit that I'm a low-key perfectionist, right? So I like things to be polished. I like to feel ready. I want things to be as good as it can be before I start to invite people in to my space, right? So I know that that discomfort is real and I'm not dismissing it. So please don't misunderstand me for saying that. But I want you to have a very clear-eyed decision. I want you to make a very clear-eyed decision about what this is costing you, because every month you spend building infrastructure without building income is a month of income that doesn't exist for you. That's the real cost. Now, let's get practical with this thing, okay? Here's a framework that I teach, and here's why it works for women who are building on the side of a full-time job. And here's the thing. The fastest path to side income, it has only 3 steps, and they go in this exact order. The very first step is to identify one problem you can solve for one specific person. The second step is to build the simplest possible version of your solution. The third step is to put your offer in front of 5 people who have the problem that you solve, okay? Those are the 3 steps, and they go in that exact order. So I want to just go a little bit deeper into each one of these, if that's okay with y'all, okay? So the very first step is to identify one problem you can solve for one specific person. I'm not talking about a niche here. I'm not talking about your target market. I'm not talking about creating a full buyer persona avatar document. I'm talking about one problem and one type of person. So think about, what do people come to you with? What do they ask you to help them figure out? What have you been solving for so long it feels obvious to you but hard for everybody else around you? Because that right there is your starting point. And this step right here I want you to get as specific as possible here because specificity is what makes your offer sellable. So when you're working through this on your own after this episode, an example of something that's not very specific is I help women in their careers. That will never sell. However, two other examples that I have written down here. The first example is I help first year managers navigate performance conversations without burning relationships. That is sellable, right? There's a clear who this is for and what is the transformation going to be like. The other example, sellable example that I have here is I help nonprofit professionals move into corporate roles without starting over. That is sellable. Why? Because it has a clear who is this person for? Oh, it's for nonprofit professionals. And what do these nonprofit professionals want to do? They want to move into corporate roles without starting over. So you can see the difference between I help women in their careers. So we know who it's for women, but what kind of women, right? Because the more specific the problem, the shorter your sales conversations are going to be. And when you're building on the side of your full-time job, shorter sales conversations are the difference between closing a client and losing one because you ran out of time to follow up. Like we have a full-time job, we have a full-time life. What I said at the beginning, ain't nobody got time for that. Okay. So let's get into the second step. And that is to build the simplest possible version of your solution. And this is the part where a lot of high achieving women get stuck because we know a lot of things. We have a lot of information in here, up here, a lot of information, right? So in this step, I don't want you to build the most comprehensive version of your solution. Or I don't want you to think of or to build a version with bonuses and workbooks and 6 follow-up emails. That's not what I'm talking about here. Here specifically, I want you to build the version that solves the specific problem that you identified in step 1. So for most coaches, the simplest possible version of your solution is a 60 to 90-minute session or a short package of sessions. Like literally, that's it. That is your first offer. It's not a course. It is not a membership. It is not a group program with a custom portal and a private community and weekly live calls that require you to be on video on Zoom every single Tuesday night. I mean, if that's what you want, you can do this. But remember, we're talking about working alongside a full-time job and the fastest way to get to the money, right? So one offer, one problem, one type of person, that is all you need to get started. Because what happens is, and the way, if you were my client, this is what I would coach you on, is to build the complexity later. Because right now you're building proof of income, you're building proof of concept. And here's what I see happen when women skip this step. When they go from, okay, I have a very specific problem that you identified in step 1, and then you just skip over into all the complex things. Like you want a membership because you want, I don't know, you want to scale before it's time to scale, right? So here's what I see happen with women who skip this step. They spend 3 months building a 5-module course and they're proud of it and it's thorough and it covers all the things. And then they launch it and nobody buys it. And it's not because the content in that course is bad, but it's because they built it for a problem they assumed that people had. They assumed people had. They didn't build it for a problem that people told them they needed to be solved. So the simple offer that I described just a second ago, I'm talking about that 60 to 90-minute session, that short engagement, that low barrier version, that does something that any course you build in a silo cannot do in the building phase, in the beginning stages of your business. And that is, it gets you in the room with a real client, with a real human, with someone who has a problem that you can solve, and you're doing this in real time together. And from that room, you learn more about what your client needs than you could learn from 6 months of planning. You learn the language they use to describe their problem. You learn the stuck points they don't know how to articulate in a survey. You learn what success looks like for that person, and you learn what gets in the way of that success. And that information is what your course or your program or your full offer suite, that's what lays the foundation, and that's what all of that other stuff gets built upon. But you can't get there until you start delivering, right? So if you're just joining, I am going over the 3 steps that it takes to build income on the side of your 9 to 5. If you missed the first 2, I encourage you to go watch the replay of this on my YouTube channel. So step 3, put that offer, that short session is what I recommend, in front of 5 people who have the problem that you solve. Remember, you solved the problem in step 1. You decided on how you're going to deliver or solve that problem in step 2. Now you're going to put it in front of 5 people. And when I say put it in front of 5 people, I don't mean your social media followers. I don't mean a cold email list. I mean 5 people in your network who have the problem that you identified. So these could be former colleagues. This could be LinkedIn connections. These could be people in communities that you're already a part of. And here's what you're not doing. You're not launching. You're not posting content and hoping that it performs. What I would advise you to do if you are my client is to have 5 targeted conversations with 5 people who need exactly what you have. And I'm just going to be very, very honest here. I have worked with dozens and dozens and dozens of women on building their businesses and building their brands online and building online businesses and starting coaching businesses. This part right here is where most women hesitate. And I have to be honest because I understand why. And it's because having direct conversation about something you want to sell, it feels vulnerable in a way that posting content, it just doesn't feel that way, right? Because you don't know who's seeing your content. Nobody's directly engaging with you, telling you no or telling you yes. Posting feels like you're putting the offer out there and letting the market come to you. If I build it, they will come. But direct conversations, it feels like asking. It feels like asking. And during a launch, I'm going to have to do a whole episode on launching, because what I see out here, what people are doing, calling it a launch, it is not a launch. There's a difference between an announcement and a launch. And when you're launching, it feels even more than asking. It feels like you might be begging when you're launching. But here's the thing. Posting content and just waiting for the market to come to you is a long game. And when you're building on the side of a full-time job with limited hours, you don't have time for a long game at the beginning. So direct conversations are the fastest path to a paying client. And that's just the way it is, y'all. I didn't write the rules. I'm just the messenger. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just walking in the path that my steps were ordered. All right. I am just the messenger. So 5 conversations is not a launch. Remember, I need to make a note for myself because I need to have a conversation about what a launch is and what a launch isn't. And 5 conversations is not a launch. It's not even a soft launch. It's a test with data. And one of 2 things are going to happen. Somebody's going to say yes, which means you have a client and income. Congratulations. Or you'll get information about why those 5 people aren't ready. And that's going to tell you exactly how to sharpen your offer. And either one of those outcomes is useful as you're building this. And neither one of those requires a website or a logo or a large social media following. Okay. Now, Let's talk about hello, hello, hello. Thanks for joining. Let's talk about the practical reality of building something when you're still working full time, because this is where the systems piece comes in. Systems. Let's talk about systems. Somebody drop systems in the comment. Here's the deal. You have limited hours, and that is real, right? Like time is finite. We all have the same number, you've heard it before. We have the same 24 hours in a day. And here's what I'm not going to do, because I'm not going to do it. I believe in leading by example, and I will never tell anybody to do this unless this is what you want to do. So I am not going to tell you to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm not going to tell you to optimize your sleep schedule or find an extra hour somewhere between your job and your life. I didn't do that when I built Her Income Edit on the side of my full-time job. And I am not going to recommend that that's what you do either. But what I am going to tell you is this. The hours you do have, they need a clear decision about what they're for. So what do you mean by that? Well, I'm glad that you asked. Here's what I see. Most people approach their side hustle, that time for their side hustle, they approach it the same way that they would approach in a free afternoon, right? So they sit down and then they look at their to-do list, and then they immediately feel overwhelmed. And then they spend the first 40 minutes deciding on what it is they're going to work on. And then by the time they've decided, they're tired. I mean, first of all, you're probably tired even going into this, right? So then they do something easy, and then they close their laptop. And here's what I want you to understand. That is not a discipline problem. You don't become a high achieving woman like you are by not being disciplined. But what this is a planning problem. So here is the system that I recommend for women who are building on the side of a full-time job. This is what worked for me, and this is what works for the women that I work with. There are 2 blocks of time, and I want you to block these 2 types of time off in your week. Those 2 blocks of time are creation time and outreach time. Creation time and outreach time. Block those 2 types of time in your week. So what is creation time? It is when you're making things. This is when you're going to write the framework for your offer, draft the conversation guide that you're going to use when you're having your calls. This is where you'll create content and you'll be building something tangible, right? You'll outline what those 60 to 90 minutes look like. So that's creation time. Outreach time is when you're talking to people, when you're following up with potential clients, when you're sending out those 5 targeted messages, when you're having conversations. And these 2 types of work require different mental energy. So this is the part of this building along your full-time job that people don't really talk about. Because the creation time and the outreach time, it requires a different mental space. So creation requires focus, uninterrupted thinking. And outreach requires your presence. It requires you to be responsive. And if you try to do both in the same window, you'll do neither one of those well. Because most people only schedule creation time because it feels safer, right? So you spend all your time, those 10 hours a week that I talked about earlier, you'll spend most of that time or all of that time doing the creation part because it feels safe. And outreach can feel like rejection. It feels like the potential for rejection. So you keep pushing your outreach time to when you have more time or when your offer feels more ready, right? But here's the thing. We're talking about the fastest way to get to the money here. We're talking about building along the side of your 9 to 5. You have a full-time job and you have a full-time life. So here's the thing. Outreach is the income generating activity. That is the activity that is going to generate the income. That is the activity that is going to literally turn your skills into income. The creation supports that activity. Creation by itself does not close clients, not when you get started. If you are brand new in this thing, or if you have been trying to figure this thing out, that right there is the keys to the kingdom, are the keys to the kingdom. Creation alone does not close clients when you're first starting out. So if you're working with 10 hours a week, here's a rough split that works. I want you to spend 6 hours of creating. So that's 60%. And then the other 40% of that, use it for your outreach and conversations. Because 6 hours is more than enough to produce one solid piece of content. It's enough to sharpen your offer and make progress on one deliverable per week. Remember, this is the rule of one. Is there a real rule of one out there? But there's this recurring thing that comes up when we're talking about building coaching businesses, right? One problem, one person, one offer, one major thing per week, right? So on the additional 4 hours, that is enough time for you to have those 3 or 4 conversations. It's enough time for you to follow up on existing threads, and it's enough time to move existing opportunities forward. And that right there, that split, that 60-40 split, that is a functioning business in progress. It is not a side hustle that you're thinking about. It is a revenue generating activity that is operating in the background of your full-time job. And when something converts and you have that first paying client, listen, something shifts, your time shifts. You deliver on that client and you start to note what's working, and you keep the outreach moving. And that's the loop. And here's the thing, it is not pretty, it is not sexy, it is not glamorous. It doesn't require a content calendar or a brand photo shoot. But here's what it does, it compounds and it works. Okay. So now let me say something else about energy, because I think the conversation about building on the side of a full-time job, it focuses way too much on hours and not enough on this part. Because you can have the time and still not make progress if you're consistently using your depleted hours of your highest focused work. So here's what I mean by that. Think about when in your week you have the most mental capacity. Is it early in the mornings before you go to work? Is it during your lunch break? Is it on the weekend before everything else gets loud? Because that window, whatever it is, it needs to be protected, fiercely protected for outreach. It needs to be protected for your conversations, for your decisions, and for the things that require you to be present and clear-headed. The creation work, on the other hand, so the drafting, the building, that can happen in your lower energy windows, because you can write a framework outline when your brain is at 70%, but you cannot have a meaningful sales conversation when your brain is at 70%, right? So I encourage you to protect your best hours for the work that requires your best thinking. And this isn't a small distinction here, because for women building on the side of demanding full-time roles, it's often the difference between a side hustle that slowly gains ground and one that stalls out indefinitely, because every attempt at moving forward happens when you're already running on empty. Like, we are women, okay? And we are every woman. We be tired, boss. And hold on, before I move on though, there's one more thing that I want to say here, because it constantly comes up. Boundaries with yourself matter as much as boundaries with other people. Boundaries with yourself matter as much as boundaries with other people. And if you are taking notes, I really want you to write this down, and I want you to personalize it. If you're taking notes, I want you to write down, boundaries with myself matter as much as boundaries with other people. So when you say that you're going to spend 90 minutes on outreach on Thursday morning, that means Thursday morning is not available for responding to extra work emails. It's not for catching up on the week's tasks. That time is not for the project that needs attention but doesn't specifically need your Thursday morning attention. Most women protect their job responsibilities and their family responsibilities and their community responsibilities with a tremendous amount of discipline. And they never let a personal task bleed into a deadline that they owe to any one of those things, whether it's your employer, your family, or your community, your church, you name it, right? But here's what I'm saying: that same energy, it needs to apply to your own financial future. The time that you've blocked out for your business is not spare time. So don't think of it as spare time, because if you think of it as spare time, you're going to treat it as spare time. What it is, it's an appointment with your income. You've made an appointment with your future. You've made an appointment with options for yourself. Okay? So this next part, I want to talk about expectations. And I want to spend some time here because I think unrealistic expectations are responsible for more abandoned side hustles than lack of time, lack of skill, or lack of opportunity. And here's what I see happen. A woman decides that she's going to start, right? She is motivated. She is hyped up, hype me up. And she sets a goal for herself, $5,000 in her first month. That seems, pretty modest, right? And this lady, she does everything right. She builds her offer. She has a few conversations. She does all the things that, that I'm saying to do in this video, in this episode. She's posting content. And at the end of the month, she didn't make a single dollar, $0. And so at the end of that month, she concludes, you know what? This doesn't even work. This is some bull. But listen, that is not failure of the model. That is not failure of the steps that I just gave you. That's failure of the timeline expectation. Because building side income, it is not a sprint. It's also not a marathon. It is more like a compound interest curve. So the early months, they're going to be slow. They're going to feel like nothing is happening. And then suddenly it feels sudden. And then something just starts to tip. Like a conversation suddenly leads to a referral. A piece of content, it finally starts to stick. And someone who wasn't ready 6 months ago, they reach back out. And then the thing you've been building, it has momentum. But here's the thing, and I've said this before, is on this platform for sure, that most women quit before they get to the tip, before they get to the momentum. And it's not because they're not committed. It's because they're measuring the wrong thing at the wrong time. Timing, it is timing. Somebody dropped timing in the comments, because timing is everything, not just when you're building your business, but in life. Timing is everything. Somebody dropped timing in the comments. Woo, thank you. So here's what realistic expectations look like for the woman who is building on the side of a full-time job. So in your first month, you're going to identify your offer. You're going to have your first 5 conversations, and you're going to close 0 to 1 client. This is realistic, y'all. Your first month, you're going to close 0 to 1 client. But what you're going to do in this first month is you're going to lay the groundwork, and you're going to build the habit of showing up consistently. Okay. So in your second month, this is where you're going to refine your offer based on the conversations you had in the first month. So remember earlier, I talked about the 2 outcomes of those 5 conversations, and both of those outcomes are good for your business. So in month 2, after you've had those 5 conversations, take that feedback, refine your offer. And by now, you're not going to stop having conversations. You're going to have 5 more conversations. So by now, in month 2, you've had 10 conversations. So during month 2, you're going to close 1 to 2 clients. And you're going to generate your first proof. So if you are doing this consistently and you're doing this correctly, in month 2, you will have closed 1 to 2 clients. So in your 3rd month, you have a testimonial. Yay, congratulations. You have a testimonial because now you know what your clients need. Your offer is sharper, your conversations start to improve, your conversions start to improve. And the word that what you're building, it starts to spread. It like people now know, like, dang, she is in this. It doesn't spread like wildfire, but people are starting to recognize who you are, what you do, and who you serve. So then let's fast forward to your 6th month, because now you have consistent income. It's not life-changing income yet, let's be clear, but it's consistent. It is recurring, and it is built on real clients who have had results that you generated. And this right here, what I just outlined, what I just walked through, that is the realistic curve for a woman who is doing this on the side of a full-time job with 10 hours a week. And I know that sounds slow compared to what you see on social media. I know there are stories about, people out there who make $20,000 in their first month and blowing up their offer in the second week. And those stories exist, but those stories are outliers. They are not the average. They're also not the goal that you should be measuring yourself against. And I want to say something else about why those stories are so damaging for women building on the side of a full-time job, and especially in the beginning. Because when you're working full-time and you're building on the side, your timeline is compressed by design. You don't have 40 hours a week to pour into this. I mean, maybe you do. I don't know. I'm not that great at math. I didn't have 40 hours a week to pour into it on the side. I am recommending that you work with 10 hours a week, 10 fiercely protected hours a week. And that means your curve is longer. And it's not because you're slower or less capable. It's because you're doing 2 things at once, more than 2 things, if you really think about it. And you're doing them all deliberately. You're doing them all with intention. So the person who made $20,000 in the first month was either working on this full time, or they had a large audience to begin with, or they just got lucky with the timing and context that you don't really have visibility into all that background stuff that led to them getting $20,000 in that first month. So comparing your month 2 to their month 1 is not an apples to apples comparison. It's not even an apples to oranges comparison. It's comparing your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel with no visibility into what that took. Are y'all picking up what I'm putting down? Show me some love here today. Because I'm pulling it all the way. The curtain is all the way open. All right. We are exposed here. So what you need to measure in your early months is an income, because income is a lagging indicator. What you need to measure is activity. How many conversations did you have this week? How many people do you know need what you have to offer? How many times did you tell someone what it is that you do? Because those are the leading indicators that tell you whether or not the income is going to come. Remember the tip that I talked about earlier? Most women quit before the tip. Most women will start this in month 1. It's June, okay? Most women will start today in June, and by December, they're not even doing it anymore. And I don't want that for you. And that's why I'm being so realistic with what this is and what this requires. And if the numbers are moving, right? The conversation numbers, how many people did you tell what you do? If those numbers are moving, the income will follow. It is not a mystery. It's a sequence. Like, it's literally a sequence. And your goal in the first 90 days isn't to build full-time income. Your goal is to build proof that your model works. So again, I'm saying it, the rule of one client, one result, one problem, one testimonial. That is the foundation of everything else, that everything else is going to be built on. And the women who have that foundation at 90 days, they're in a completely different position than the woman who spent those 90 days building the infrastructure and waiting to feel ready. Remember the infrastructure I talked about? So spend the 90 days doing those income generating activities as opposed to building that infrastructure. So before we talk about keeping it simple, I want to flip something for you here because I think this is the one that changes everything about how you approach building on the side. So most women think they think about their job as the thing that is competing for their side hustle time, that their job is in competition with whatever it is that they're building on the side. And that they feel like their job is what's in the way, that the job is what's eating their hours, that your job is the reason that you can't move as fast as you want to. And that's one way to think about it. And that perspective, it honestly just makes your job feel like an obstacle and a thorn and something that you can't move out of your way. And when something feels like an obstacle, you start to resent it. And when you start to resent it, every hour you spend at work, it starts to feel like an hour that's stolen from the thing that you're trying to build. And if you're new here, this is going to be your first time hearing this. If you have been rocking with me for a while in these Nik at Noon episodes, you know that this, what I'm about to say, is how I feel. But I feel like it's very important to bring it up in this conversation. And I really, truly, if that's how you feel about your job while you're building this on the side, I really, really, really want you to try a completely different lens on for this, because your job is funding your side hustle. I believe that your job is your first investor in your business. It is writing you a check every week, every 2 weeks, every month, whatever the cadence is, so that you can build something on the side without the pressure of needing for it to work right now. And I want you to think about what that pressure looks like when it's not there. When your bills are covered, you can take your time getting your first offer right. You don't have to rush to market with something half baked because tuition is due. When your income is stable, you can say no to clients that aren't a fit for you. You're not taking every person who shows interest in what you're doing just because you need the money. You're choosing clients you can get results for, which means you get better testimonials, you get better referrals, you have a stronger reputation from the very beginning. And when you have a runway, a slow month in your business, it doesn't feel like a crisis. It feels like data. You can look at what's working, what's not working, you can adjust, and you can try again without the desperation that makes people make bad decisions in their businesses. And that is a different starting place than someone who quit their job yesterday to do this full time and now has 90 days of savings left before the math doesn't math anymore. So, the woman who is building on the side of her full time job, she has something that a full time entrepreneur often doesn't. She has patience as a competitive advantage. So, you can afford to do it right. You can afford to wait for the right client. You can afford to learn from month one, from the very first time you do this, without it costing you everything. And I know it doesn't feel like an advantage when you're exhausted from a full day of work and trying to find 30 minutes to move the needle in your business. So I know this, but I know your job can also feel like the thing between you want to go, right? Like it feels like this is the blocker. But here's the thing, the women that I have watched build the most sustainable businesses, they didn't build them in panic. They built them with intention, and they built them in the margins without the clock of financial desperation ticking in the background. And your job, it gives you that margin. So I would encourage you to stop treating it like your enemy and to start treating it like the resource that it is, because it is. And I want to come back to something that I said earlier in this conversation. Hello, hello, hello. Thanks so much. Hobby to CEO. I see you. Thanks for the love. So I want to come back to something I said earlier because I think it's the piece that gets lost in most conversations about building on the side. Simplicity is not a starting point that you graduate from. Because a lot of women, I'll keep it simple now. And then when I have more time, I'll build the real thing, right? And the real thing is always more complex. It has more moving parts. It has more to manage, more to market, and more to deliver. And complexity is fine when you have the infrastructure to support it, but complexity too early in this, it kills your side hustle. It will kill your side hustle because complexity requires time you don't have when you're also working full time. So here's the simplicity principle that I want you to keep coming back to at every single stage of your business. I want you to answer this question every single time. What is the smallest version of this thing that delivers the most value? I'm not talking about a minimum viable product here in the startup sense. I'm not talking about an MVP. I know we talk about it a lot in this space. That's not what I'm talking about here. I talk about it MVP personally, but I know a lot of other coaches do. What I'm talking about is the minimum viable experience for your client. What is that? So if somebody paid you right now for what you know, what would be the most direct path from their problem to their result? What does that look like? Not the most thorough path, the most direct path. Because that right there is your offer, and that's where you start. Not the 6-module course, not the 12-month program with weekly calls, the most direct path from your client's problem to their result. Because I said it earlier, but I really want to punctuate it here. You can build the 6-module course later from what you learned delivering the direct path version. You'll build it better because your clients will have told you exactly what it is that they need. But you can't wait until the 6-month or the 6-course module is built before you start. Because if you wait, you'll spend the next 6 months building something that may or may not solve the problem you think it solves. And you'll have no income if you're building the 6-module course over the next 6 months. You'll have no income. You'll have no proof. You'll have no clients. You'll have no one to tell you what it is that you need to fix. So I want you to start direct, and then I want you to earn the complexity. Now, let me give you an example of what this looks like so it just doesn't stay in the abstract. Say that you are a project manager with 8 years of experience, right? You have led cross-functional teams, you have managed stakeholders, you have navigated the scope creep, you have delivered on timelines that constantly shifted underneath you, right? And now you want to start a coaching or a consulting business on the side. So the complex version of this project manager's coaching or consulting business looks like this. Build a 12-week program covering project management, fundamentals, stakeholder management, risk frameworks, and leadership through ambiguity. You create a curriculum, a workbook, a resource library. You build a sales page, a checkout page, an email sequence, and you spend 3 months getting ready. That's the complex version. And that's usually the version that a lot of women that come into this space, that's what they've seen, and that's where they believe they need to start. But now let's talk about the direct version for this project manager. You offer a 90-minute strategic session for new managers who are overwhelmed by their first large-scale project. You charge $300. You find 5 people in your LinkedIn network who just got promoted into a project lead role. You reach out to them directly. And that version can generate your first $300 this week. The complex, here's what I want you to get. I don't want you to miss this. The complex version might generate a bigger number in month 4, but only if people buy it. And you won't know if people will buy it until you've learned what people need, which you learn from doing the direct version, right? So this is not a shortcut. It's the right order to do these things. And I talk to women all the time who have spent 6 months building something that nobody bought. Like, has that ever happened to you? If it's happened to you, know that you're not alone. But I have talked to so many women who have done this, who have been in a silo, in the lab, making their course. I'm in the lab making my course for 6 months. And then when they put it out there, nobody bought it. And then these women have convinced that the problem is that their course wasn't good enough, that their course wasn't polished enough, and that it wasn't comprehensive enough. And in most cases, the problem is that they built this course before they even listened, before they heard, before they knew exactly what to build this course on. So the simple offer that I've been talking about this whole episode, that is how you listen. And it's not, this is the part in all of this. The simple offer, the minimum viable experience, the direct path, that is not the permanent version of your business. It's how you build the foundation that the permanent version is going to get built on. So this is just where you start. This is not where you're going to be in the middle or the end. And here's the thing that I want you to walk away with today. Here is what I want you to walk away with today. The fastest way to start a side hustle while working full time is not to find more time, because we don't have it. It's to use the time that you have in the right order. So lean into that principle of one type of person, one simple offer that solves that problem. Okay? Have 5 direct conversations. And I want you to have realistic expectations about what the first 90 days in your business looks like. That right there is the system. I just gave you the whole game. I just gave y'all the whole game. It's not complicated. And I know it is not sexy. I know it is not glamorous, but it works. When most others approaches to this business, this one works better because it doesn't require you to have everything figured out before you start. So again, I'm going to site to have your first client conversation. You do not need a course outline to tell someone that you can help them. You do not need to have a brand photo shoot to close a client. What you need is clarity on the one problem you solve and the willingness to have one direct conversation with 5 people who have the problem that you solve. And that right there truly is the entry point to all of this. And I want to say one more thing before I close, because I think this one's important too. Starting a side hustle while working full time isn't about proving that you can do all the things. It is not about hustle culture. It is not about grinding. It is not about being superwoman. This is about building options while you have the stability, while you still have income, while you have breathing room to make decisions from a place of strategy instead of a place of desperation. See, I launched Her Income Edit as a full-time business on the back of a layoff. And I was in a better position than most women in that scenario because I had been building it. I was building it before the decision got made for me to move up the timeline, right? But I would have rather been in the position of choosing my own timeline. I would rather have been the woman who left her job because I was ready, not the woman who had to move because the option was removed for me. And that's what you're building right now if you start. Like, you're building and you're creating options for yourself, and they're not coming out of urgency. You're building the ability to leave your job or whatever situation it is when you want to. You are building the ability to negotiate from a position of strength, to look at a job offer or restructuring or a difficult workplace situation and know that your financial life does not live or die by what one employer decides for you. And that is the goal in all of this. It is not a perfect website or a viral launch or a five-figure month that you may or may not have in your first month. I'm talking about the slow, steady compounding reality of having built something real that belongs entirely to you. And if you have an idea and you're not sure where to start with your first offer, that is exactly what 2K in 2 hours is built for. It is a micro course that walks you through how to take what you already know and build it into an offer that someone will pay for. Listen, this is not a business plan. This is not a 90-day roadmap. 2K in 2 hours is a framework for translating your existing skills into income in the most direct way possible. You can learn more about my micro course 2K in 2 hours by visiting my website at herincomeedit.com/2K, or you can just click the link down in the description. But here's the thing: the women who build income while working full time are not the ones with the most time. They're the ones who stopped waiting for more time and got clear on exactly what to do with the time that they already have. And that is the move, y'all. That's the move. That is the move. That is the move. Hello, hello, hello. Thanks for joining. Listen, I want to thank each and every one of you that popped in and out of today's conversation. This is one that's near and dear to my heart. I hope that you found something in it that will help you along your way on your journey. If you haven't already, I encourage you to hit that subscribe button and turn your notifications on so you don't miss a beat. My name is Nik Scott. I am the founder and CEO of Her Income Edit. I help women turn their existing skills into online coaching, digital products, and online businesses. If that is something that you're interested in, go ahead and check me out on my website. Check me out. I am here Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at noon Mountain Time, Nik at noon. If you found anything valuable in this conversation, I encourage you to share this episode with your biz bestie. If there is anything regarding these online businesses, digital products, and coaching income that is on your spirit or your heart that you would like to hear me address, you can shoot me an email or you can send me a DM on LinkedIn or Instagram and let me know what ideas you have. I would love to see what you would like to hear about on these episodes. All right. And that is all I got for y'all. So I will see you in the next. Bye.